Have you ever noticed that most of your pain doesn't come from what happens, but from what you expected to happen? Maybe you thought someone would treat you the way you treated them. Maybe you believed life should have rewarded you for your effort, or that love should have lasted longer than it did. But when life didn't follow your plan, something inside you quietly broke. We all live with invisible expectations. We expect people to understand. We expect success to come. We expect happiness to stay. But life is like the ocean, beautiful, wild, unpredictable. The tighter you try to hold it, the more it slips through your fingers. So today, let's talk about how to truly let go of expectations. Not to stop caring, but to start living in peace, the way the Buddha gently taught, with awareness, acceptance, and compassion. And if this message speaks to something deep within you, leave the word freedom in the comments, not for anyone else, but as a quiet promise to yourself that you're ready to let go, to trust, and to begin again with peace. Number 1. Understanding the root of expectations. Expectations are not just ideas floating through the mind. They're quiet contracts we try to make with reality. Contracts no one else signed. Deep down, they grow from a wish to feel safe, to keep the unpredictable in neat lines. We tell ourselves that if we expect the right things and hold them tightly, life will hurt less. But control is a fragile illusion. It's like trying to command the tide with a watch in your hand. The ocean doesn't read our plans. It follows the moon. From a Buddhist lens, suffering begins where clinging begins. You don't need jargon to see it. Notice the subtle should in the background of your day. This meeting should go smoothly. This person should understand. The body should always perform. The world should reward effort. That should is the string attached to the kite of expectation. In a still moment, you can hear two voices inside, one saying, "This shouldn't be happening," and another, quieter, truer, whispering, "But it is." Mindfulness lives with the second voice. Acceptance walks with it. Non-attachment is simply the willingness to stop dragging the rope. Think of a long-planned trip that didn't unfold the way you imagined. The skies turned gray, the train ran late. The conversation you hoped would heal didn't. The sharpness you felt wasn't born from clouds or timetables or words. It rose from the distance between what arrived and what you scripted. Reality was the river, and expectation was the rigid mold you tried to pour it into. Rivers carve their banks over years. They do not take directions from maps. This is why letting go of expectations is at the heart of inner peace. It's not about lowering standards or refusing to care. It's about releasing your grip on outcomes you cannot guarantee and softening into the present moment as it actually is. In practice, it starts as something small and human. You notice your jaw tighten, your chest pull inward, your breath climb into your throat. That's your body reporting resistance. Mindfulness says, feel it. Acceptance says, let it be here. Non-attachment says, and now let it pass. None of this is a lecture to yourself. It's more like watching weather move across a wide sky. Clouds arrive, change shape, and keep going. You don't have to chase them. Expectations often hide inside love and good intentions. We want someone to call back, to apologize, to see what we see. We want a plan to unfold with elegance. We want effort to equal results always. But the world is stitched with impermanence. Blossoms open when spring is ready, not when we press the calendar. Leaves release when autumn asks, not when we schedule their fall. To insist otherwise is to stand beneath a tree and demand it keep its color. The tree is wiser. It surrenders, and in surrender remains whole. There's a practical tenderness in this perspective. When an outcome matters, show up fully. Prepare well. Speak honestly. Then set the outcome down. In other words, act with care and let go of control. Detach from the scoreboard and stay close to your values. How you move, how you speak, how you love. This is where how to let go of expectations becomes more than a phrase. It becomes a way of walking. You are not abandoning your life. You are releasing the inner script that turns every surprise into a personal failure. You're learning to trust the flow of life without drifting into passivity. If you listen closely, you'll notice expectation and fear travel together. Fear says, if this doesn't happen, I won't be okay. Acceptance answers, even if it doesn't, I will meet it. That's not magical thinking. It's the strength that comes from living in the present moment, rather than bargaining with the future. A lake becomes clear when the wind settles. The mind is the same. When you let the water rest, the bottom appears. Non-attachment is often misunderstood as indifference. It isn't. It's warm, awake, steady. It lets love be love instead of a contract. It lets effort be noble even when results wander. It lets a conversation be honest without demanding agreement. In this spirit, mindfulness, acceptance, and surrender aren't grand spiritual poses. They're everyday movements of the heart. Notice, soften, release, again and again. The practice is circular, like seasons returning, each time teaching the same lesson in a new color. In the end, the root of expectations is the hope that certainty will save us. What actually saves us is intimacy with what's here. When you stand on the shore and let the waves be waves, you discover a wider kind of safety, the kind that doesn't depend on forecasts. This is the quiet promise of Buddhist teachings. When you stop arguing with reality, suffering begins to loosen its grip. And in the space that opens, inner peace, simple, grounded, unforced, has room to breathe. Number 2, the practice of acceptance. Acceptance is one of those quiet words that sounds simple, but feels almost impossible when life doesn't cooperate. It isn't surrendering your strength or pretending that pain doesn't exist. It's the courage to see life exactly as it unfolds, raw, unscripted, unpredictable, and to stop fighting the parts you cannot change. In a world obsessed with fixing, controlling, and labeling everything, the practice of acceptance is almost revolutionary. It invites us to stop painting over reality with the colors we wish it had, and simply look at what is already there. When something doesn't go your way, the first place you feel it is not in the mind, but in the body. Your shoulders rise, your chest tightens, your breath shortens. That's resistance and the body's way of saying, I don't want this. In that very moment, mindfulness begins. Acceptance doesn't ask you to like the situation. It only asks you to breathe through it. The breath becomes a bridge between what hurts and what heals. Whispering, I let go, isn't a command to the universe, but an act of kindness toward yourself. You're not giving up. You're giving space. Control feels comforting, but it's a heavy comfort, like carrying a backpack full of rocks because you're afraid to put it down. When you finally release that weight, the first thing you notice is not weakness, but lightness. Acceptance is that release. It opens space where tension once lived, and in that space, peace quietly enters. This is not a mystical event. It's something you can feel in the small details of ordinary life. Imagine a gust of wind sweeping through tall grass. The blades that bend stay rooted. The ones that resist snap. That's the natural law of flexibility, and it applies just as deeply to the mind. When you bend, you survive. When you soften, you find strength and flow. Acceptance works the same way. It's not submission. It's alignment. You learn to move with the current instead of against it, trusting that the river knows how to find the ocean. In Buddhist teachings, acceptance and non-attachment walk hand in hand. Non-attachment doesn't mean indifference. It means being present without clinging. You can love without possessing, hope without demanding, act without expecting. Acceptance lets you participate in life without the constant need to rewrite it. It transforms "why is this happening to me?" into "this is what's happening and how can I meet it wisely?" That shift is subtle but life-changing. You can see this lesson everywhere in nature. The mountain accepts the storm without complaint. It doesn't ask the wind to be gentle or the rain to stop early. The ocean doesn't argue with the tide. It moves in rhythm with the moon. A tree doesn't curse winter for stripping its leaves. It simply waits, silent and sure, knowing spring will come again. None of these are acts of passivity. They are acts of deep living intelligence. They remind us that acceptance is not about inaction, but about harmony with what is. When you stop resisting the moment, you begin to experience a different kind of strength. The quiet, steady kind that doesn't depend on outcomes. You discover that peace doesn't need perfect circumstances to exist. It just needs space to breathe. The act of breathing itself becomes a form of prayer, a small surrender repeated countless times a day. Each exhale is a gentle letting go. The paradox is that through acceptance, life becomes lighter, not because it changes, but because you do. The world outside remains unpredictable, but inside something softens. This softening is not defeat. It's clarity. It's the realization that trying to control the rain doesn't stop it from falling, but learning to stand in it can change how it feels against your skin. Mindful acceptance is this balance, being awake enough to see things clearly and compassionate enough to allow them to be. Standing in the rain without resentment, feeling each drop as it lands, knowing the storm will pass and that you were never truly in danger. It's the art of letting peace return, not by force but by allowing it to find you, naturally, like sunlight breaking through after the clouds have said all they needed to say. Number 3. Practicing mindful letting go. Practicing mindful letting go is not a single act of release. It's a quiet rhythm that flows through everyday life. It's not about cutting ties with the world, but about loosening the invisible knots inside you, the ones that tighten whenever life doesn't go your way. To practice letting go mindfully means to live with open hands instead of clenched fists, to meet each moment as it comes without demanding that it stay, change, or conform to your desires. Every day brings endless chances to practice. Someone forgets their promise, traffic slows you down, a plan unravels. Each of these moments whispers the same invitation. Watch, breathe, release. The mind will rush in to protest, saying, "This shouldn't be happening." But mindfulness doesn't argue. It just observes. Like watching clouds drift across a wide sky, you begin to see your thoughts move, forming, fading, reshaping, while the sky itself remains untouched. That sky is your awareness. It doesn't fight the storm. It holds it with calm clarity. This is the essence of mindfulness, awareness without judgment. You begin to notice how thoughts rise and fall like waves, how emotions crash and settle, and how everything that once felt solid is actually fluid. The practice is not to suppress or replace those thoughts, but to witness them with compassion. Imagine standing by the ocean at dusk, waves rolling in and out. You can't stop the tide, but you can stop believing that you are the tide. The more you practice, the more you realize. The waves are your experiences, but the ocean, vast, still, and steady, is who you truly are. When you identify with the wave, you suffer. When you remember that you are the ocean, you find inner peace. This shift is the heart of non-attachment, a central idea in Buddhist teachings. It doesn't mean you stop caring or withdraw from life. True non-attachment is not cold or distant. It's warm spaciousness. It's the capacity to love deeply without clinging, to act fully without obsessing over the result. You can hold someone close while still allowing them to be free. You can work with all your heart and still accept whatever comes. Practicing mindful letting go is not passive. It's an active softness, a deliberate choice to meet life with open awareness instead of resistance. Think of a tree in the wind. The rigid branches snap under pressure, but the flexible ones bend and sway, then return to stillness once the storm has passed. The tree's strength lies in its ability to yield. The same is true for you. When you resist, you exhaust yourself. When you yield, you discover resilience, the kind that comes not from control, but from trust. Letting go in this sense is a form of wisdom. It's understanding that life is movement, that change is not the enemy, but the nature of everything. You don't have to fix every wave or capture every sunset. Some things are meant to pass, and your peace depends on allowing them to do so. Even the breath teaches this lesson. Inhale, hold, exhale, release. The exhale is letting go, gentle, necessary, and life-giving. Without it, nothing can flow. Over time, this practice changes how you experience the world. You start to notice the pause between reaction and response. You feel the freedom that comes when you don't have to control the weather, the timing, or the outcome. You simply stand in awareness, steady like the mountain, fluid like the river, open like the sky. And somewhere in that quiet balance, life feels lighter, clearer. You realize that peace was never about having everything go right. It was about learning to stay right here, breathing while everything moves around you. To live this way is to move beyond grasping. You still care, you still love, but your love is no longer fear disguised as control. It becomes something pure, a space where both you and the world can simply exist as you are. This is what it means to live from true freedom. Not the freedom of escaping life, but the freedom of being fully alive within it, anchored in awareness, unshaken by the changing waves. Number 4. Trusting the flow of life. Trusting the flow of life is one of the hardest and most liberating lessons you'll ever learn. It asks you to soften your grip on how you think things should unfold and to lean into the rhythm of what's actually happening. It's not about giving up. It's about giving in, not to defeat, but to the quiet intelligence of the universe that moves through everything. When you stop forcing, life begins to move with you instead of against you. There's a quiet strength in surrender, a gentle courage in saying, I trust life more than my plans. Most of us are taught to believe that control equals safety, that if we manage every detail, we can avoid pain or failure. But control is like trying to hold water in your hands. The harder you squeeze, the faster it slips away. The tighter we cling to our expectations, the more fragile we become. The moment you begin to loosen that grip, a strange calm starts to surface. The calm that comes from realizing you never had control in the first place, only the illusion of it. Think of a river. It doesn't argue with the rocks in its path. It flows around them, carving its way gently yet persistently toward the sea. The river doesn't need to force its direction. It trusts the pull of gravity, the shape of the earth, the natural order that guides it home. Trusting the flow of life works the same way. When you let go of your need to push against what is, you begin to move with life's current, instead of exhausting yourself swimming upstream. That's where true peace begins, not in changing the direction of the river, but in learning to float. Sometimes, what you didn't plan becomes exactly what you needed. The detour you resented turns into a doorway. The delay you cursed becomes a moment of rest that saved you from burnout. The loss that broke your heart clears space for something real to enter. This isn't magic. It's perspective. When you stop demanding that life follow your schedule, you create room for life to surprise you. And life, when given space, has a way of revealing its own kind of wisdom, one that's often kinder than our own. In Buddhist teachings, this surrender is a form of wisdom, not weakness. It's a deep recognition of impermanence, the truth that nothing stays the same, and that's precisely what allows growth and renewal. The seasons show us this every year. Winter doesn't fight spring, and autumn doesn't cling to summer's warmth. Each yields in its time, trusting the greater rhythm to carry the world forward. That same rhythm moves through your life, whether you notice it or not. Mindfulness helps you see that rhythm in motion. When you stop trying to control the outcome, you begin to see the subtle beauty of unfolding, how one moment naturally gives birth to the next. You realize that peace isn't found in having everything go your way, but in knowing that you can meet whatever comes your way with grace. The heart that has learned to let things be is not passive, it's wise. It knows that freedom doesn't come from getting what you want. It comes from releasing what you no longer need. Trusting the flow of life doesn't mean you stop caring or stop taking action. It means you act with intention but without attachment. You plant the seed, but you don't tug on the roots to make it grow faster. You give your best, then allow life to do its part. That shared dance between effort and surrender is where balance lives. The more you trust, the lighter you become. Not because life gets easier, but because you no longer weigh yourself down with resistance. When you begin to live this way, clarity comes quietly, like morning light spreading over still water. You start to understand that letting go of expectations doesn't take anything from you. It gives back everything you've been searching for: peace, freedom, and a kind of unshakable calm that doesn't depend on perfect circumstances. You begin to feel at home in uncertainty, to see beauty in imperfection, and to recognize that life's rhythm has been carrying you all along. The moment you stop fighting it, you don't lose control. You finally join the dance. Closing reflections. So tonight, before you sleep, think of one expectation you can release. Maybe of someone you love, maybe of yourself. Take a slow breath in, and as you exhale, imagine letting that weight go. Feel how light the body becomes when the mind stops demanding. It must be different. That's not weakness, and that's awakening. And if this message found you at the right time, maybe it's life's gentle way of saying, it's time. Time to stop controlling, time to stop resisting, time to live with peace and trust. Leave the word peace below if you're ready to practice. Not for attention, but as a quiet promise to yourself that you'll begin to live, not from expectation, but from awareness. Because the real power of letting go isn't about losing. It's about remembering that peace was never gone. You just stopped noticing it.